The long-awaited age of 14 had arrived, and along with it the opportunity to go to church dances. My first dance was horrible. I was a wallflower. Finally, someone must have bribed a 14-year-old boy to ask me to dance. It was awful. Neither of us knew what to do. It was over a year before I went to another dance. When I was 15, I moved with my parents to Walnut Creek, California, for just 6 months so my dad could finish working on his book. It was a magical time for me. I was the new girl in what was well known as a cliquish ward. Against my better judgment, I went to the Valentine's dinner dance. When the dance started, I put my back to the dance floor so I could talk with Judy Call and Doris Hanna. I figured if I was pretending that I wasn't interested in dancing, that at least I couldn't be called a wallflower. But pretty soon, someone tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to dance. I didn't dance every single dance that dance, but almost. There was this guy that I kind of liked. His name was Alan Rounds. He asked me for 2 dances. And then, at the end, for the last slow dance, he asked me for that too. Well, there was a guy at school, a Jewish guy named Neil Pinkett. And he'd been walking around with me in the hallway and at lunch. And sometimes he walked me home. When he had somehow heard about the church dance, and he cornered Doris before school started and asked her who I had danced with. She said, "Oh, lots of guys." But he demanded, "Name one." So she said Alan, because she figured Alan went to a different school and he wouldn't know who Alan was. But immediately, Neil responded, "Rounds, that guy goes after everything in a skirt." Well, Neil pouted for the rest of the day. That weekend, there was a basketball game at Alan's high school, and Neil went to it. And Alan and Neil hung out together, along with a girl named Jeannie Oschlager. Now, that Monday was the day that I transferred into my new home economics class. And the girl that was sitting next to me introduced herself as Jeannie Oschlager. I hadn't, at that point, heard anything about the game, but the girls at that table were all buzzing and chattering and so excited about some guy named Alan. So I turned to Jeannie and I said, "Alan who?" And she said, "Oh, you don't know him, Alan Rounds." I went back to being very quiet. In the hallway, Neil pointed out Jeannie Oschlager and said that at the basketball game, Alan had been flirting with her. Well, that didn't bother me at all because at seminary, Alan had asked me to put his name on the guest list for the school dance at my school that coming Friday, which I did. When I went to the dance, there was a short line of kids waiting for them to open the door. And right after I arrived, Jeannie came and stood right behind me. And she asked me if Neil was coming. And I said that I didn't know. And after a while, Alan showed up, and he positioned himself right between me and Jeannie. Well, Jeannie asked him, "Who put your name on the guest list?" But he didn't need to answer. The line had started moving, and he paid my way in. Well, that dance had immediate consequences. First, Neil quit hanging out with me. Next, the home economics teacher moved me to a different table, which happened to be the same table where the cliquish girls at church were sitting. that was what it took for me to break into the cool kids set at church. But I missed hanging out with Neil. He'd been a lot of fun. And when I got to know the cool girls, they were fun and interesting, but they also tended to be conniving and full of gossip and sometimes deceitful, whereas Doris and Judy had been welcoming and straightforward and kind. If I had to do it over again, I would, hard to say, it was so much fun to be one of the cool kids for just a few months. But then again, looking at it from the perspective of 50 years hindsight, it seems obvious to me that Neil and Alan had some kind of a long-term competition or rivalry game going on. And Jeannie Oschlager and I had just been pawns or victims. If I had to do it over again, I would have told Alan, look, I'm still 15, so it would not be appropriate for me to go to meet you at a dance. That would have foiled his plan to take me away from Neil. And maybe I could have stayed friends with both of them.